Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. نوينا التعلم والتعليم والتذكر والتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والإفادة والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله والسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم والدعاء إلى الهدى والدلالة على الخير ابتغاء مرضات الله ووجهه وقربه وثوابه. اللهم افتح علينا بحكمتك وانشر علينا برحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. يا عليم علمنا من علمك ما ترضى به عنا ولا تؤاخذنا بما تعلمه منا. يا حليم خلقنا بخلق الحلم وحققنا بحقائق العلم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. I want to thank you for coming, and I'm honored by your presence. We will have a fairly good amount of time together today, and this time is for you. And for that reason, I want you to feel free to ask questions. I prefer that the questions that you ask be directly relevant to what we say. If I use a word that you don't understand, then you feel free to ask about that, and don't be embarrassed. What we're talking about is a different way of looking at the world. And it is a way of looking at the world which is unfamiliar to most human beings today, whether they are Muslims or non-Muslims. It is what we call the traditional Muslim world view, but very few people have inherited it. And very few people know what it is or how to use it. And therefore, we don't want to go too fast. We don't want to say too many things. We want to be able, to walk together on this path. And that means that you need to tell me any questions that you have. And then we can work that out, and you'll be very certain that any questions you have, any perplexities you have, you're not the only one. So if you ask a question, someone else will also be very thankful for that. Beauty, the splendor of truth. Beauty, the splendor of truth. What does that mean? Beauty, the splendor of truth. What does that mean? And if anybody would like to venture an answer, then you're most welcome to do that. And we might express that in a contrary way. Ugliness, the brand of falsehood. Ugliness, the brand of falsehood. When we look at traditional Islamic societies, wherever they were beautiful. Our cities were garden cities. Our cities could provide all the food the people needed. That was one of the first requirements of an Islamic city. It had to be able to provide all the water and food that its people needed. It could not be dependent on the outside. It had to be self-sufficient. And that was an amazing principle. Okay, and it meant that all of our cities, Cairo, Damascus, Lahore, wherever they were beautiful cities. And everything we produced was beautiful. Even our dishes, even our clothing, our carpets. And that wasn't just true in the cities. If you were to go to a simple village, let's say a Thai Muslim village in the sea, you would see that the mosques they made from bamboo and everything they made was absolutely beautiful. And this is not something that was unique to us alone. It was something typical of what we could call people with tradition. If you looked at the First Nations of Canada and the United States, the so-called Indians, we call them here Native Americans, everything they did was beautiful too. Everything they did, spectacularly beautiful. Okay, so why? What was the reason for that? If you went into a Tawarik village, do we have any Bosnians here? You know, Bosnia was so beautiful as an expression of Islamic agricultural culture in Europe that Europeans, had it not been destroyed, would have been in awe of it. This is what we did everywhere we went. If you went into the southern Sahara Desert and were a guest of the Tawarik, where the men wear veils, you'd see that everything they make too is incredibly beautiful. A Tawarik rug or carpet, if you were to bring it to New York City, you could sell it for a fortune, probably in 15 minutes. So what is the reason for that? And so this is what we want to talk about today. Beauty is the splendor of truth. And the beauty of Islamic civilization, that it was the splendor of the truth that civilization embodied. Wherever it went, from China to Java, Central Asia, Africa, wherever it went. And we have to understand this. And we have to grasp it. And we have to live it. And we have to revive it. And if we are able to do that, then we become creators of civilization again. And this is one of our biggest tasks of all, because we live in a time when the whole world needs civilization. Even this wonderful country. It needs civilization. It needs to be rooted in reality. It needs to have access to beauty. And this is a desperate need at this time, both in the West and in the Muslim world. And we don't want to belittle any of our brothers and sisters or any of our great scholars in the Muslim world. They do the best they can do. But one of the amazing things of this time is that there's no question about our sincerity. You know, but one of the amazing things about this time is that we have come into the modern era with our spiritual apparatus intact. And nobody else has done that. That is an amazing sign. You can still go to Mecca. You can still go to Medina. You can still go, well, Jerusalem's still there. We pray essentially in the way that our Prophet prayed, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We fast essentially in the way that our Prophet fasted. We pay zakat, we give charity, we do umrah, we make hajj. So this we have inherited, and of course we've inherited all the books of the past as well. We have a huge corpus of manuscripts, not even 10% of which has even really been looked at, much less to have been published. Okay, so we pray very much in the outward form of the way the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba prayed. But our minds are very different. Our worldview is very different. And often it's difficult for us to understand the way that the great men and women of Islam who lived hundreds of years ago talked about the world or lived in the world. Okay, and so what's very important for us is to be able to understand them. And that's not just a linguistic problem that, well, we don't use this word today. Okay, so this is, okay, sorry about that. Sorry about that. And so beauty is the splendor of truth. That means that beauty has ontological roots. Beauty has ontological roots. That's a big word, ontological. And what does that mean? This is a place where does anybody have an answer? Beauty has ontological roots. Who wants to say what they understood from that? I know that Nuri knows that already. Yes?
I think ontology is the study of being. So
Mm-hmm.
that ontological roots is probably that it is something that came to the mind.
Please come in. Please come in. Repeat what you said, please.
And to say that beauty is ontological quality is probably to say that it's something that came to the mind more than just an existential value.
Okay, that's very good that you give me that feedback. So, ontology pertains to the nature of being. It is the study of being. And this is not too loud, it doesn't echo. Okay, what did you want to say? The brother who raised his hand? Well, that's all very good. So, we're not too far. We're on the track. But what I mean to say by that is that beauty is related to the very nature of reality. Beauty is related to the very nature of existence, of being. Okay, that's what beauty is the splendor of truth. That's what that means. And inshallah, we will talk about this a lot. And hopefully it will become perfectly familiar to you. Okay, so let's, and again, whether the word ontological is the best word we should use here, it might be confusing, but that's what I mean by that. That beauty has metaphysical roots. Beauty has roots that pertain to the ultimate principles that underlie reality. Okay? Beauty is related to the ultimate principles that underlie reality. Beauty is central to the nature of reality when properly perceived. Beauty and true knowledge go hand in hand. And they have another companion, which is virtue, goodness. Okay, now when you talk about this, you're formulating something which was at the very essence of the way Muslims understood the world traditionally. Okay, God is the haqq. He is the real. He is the ultimately real one. And the closer you come to God, the more real you become. And the more that the things that we do are integrated into the belief in God, the witnessing of God, then the more real we become. Okay? When we know the truth will set you free. The truth must transform you. It must set you free. If the truth doesn't transform you, then you don't have it. You may have memorized the right words, but they are not, you haven't perceived them in your heart. You cannot perceive the truth and not be overtaken and conquered by the truth. And when that happens, and you perceive the truth, and you're transformed by the truth, you become very real. The closer you get to God, the more real you become. The more that you see illusion for illusion, and delusion for delusion, and you see truth for truth. And then you become internally beautiful. Internally beautiful. God is beautiful, and He loves beauty. Beauty is the splendor of truth. God is beautiful. Inna Allaha jameel, yuhibbul jamal. That is sahih. God is beautiful, and He loves beauty. And always in language, we have things like mafhum al-mukhalafa, what you understand from the contrary point of view which is not spoken. God does not love ugliness. And this is one of the reasons why Muslims were so beautiful, because they knew that God loves beauty. And Muslims tended to be extremely skilled laborers, because our societies were dominated by guilds, which we call asnaf, by guilds. The medieval Europeans also had guilds. It's said that that's one of the things they brought home from the Crusades. But the men and women of the guilds were extremely skilled, whether they were leather workers, gold workers, metal, silver workers, stone cutters, tanners, weavers, medicine makers, or whatever they were. They were extremely skilled. They were very proud of what they did. How could they build these mosques they built? You know, which many of you have seen yourselves. Mosques that, like the great mosque of Sinan in Edirne in Turkey, which is one of the most beautiful pieces of the glorification of God on earth. You know, or like Sultan Hassan. You can't go in there and not be amazed. Okay, so God loves beauty. God is beauty. And therefore, if you come close to the rule, the real, will you not become beautiful? The microphone agrees. Right? The microphone agrees, but we'll ask, please don't comment. All right? And what is that inner beauty? That goodness, virtue, husnul khuluq, husnul khuluq. And these things go together. Today we often think of intelligence as something that has nothing to do with character. You can be a really good person and solve mathematical problems, and you can be a dissolute person, just one of the miserable human beings of the earth. Doesn't know how to treat his wife right or his children right. You can still solve the same mathematical question. Okay, but for us in Islamic civilization, and this is again true of traditional civilizations in general, intelligence is not problem solving. You know, we tip our hats to the engineers, but this is very important. Intelligence is not simply the ability to identify quantifiable problems and then solve them. No, it's not. Intellect can only grow in the soil of virtue, of goodness. This is extremely important. Extremely important. And of course, intellect, al-aql, is okay?
Maybe we'll go back to the other.
Yeah, you know, we do whatever we have to do. You have to hear. You have to be able to hear. If you want to hook that up to my ear, we can do it.
I think it's good.
Okay, let's do it. All right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Inshallah.
This one.
Okay. There we go. Okay, Bismillah. Is that better?
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit loud. Okay. How's that? Is that good? Okay. Now, were you able to follow up to this point? We don't have to start all over? And then let's just remove this. So, when you know the truth will set you free. It will transform you. And you will become a good person. Okay? And you become internally beautiful. Because God is beautiful. And that is what we call goodness, virtue, good character, husnul khuluq. And when you become internally beautiful, in the way you think, the way you watch your heart, then what comes from you will be beautiful. What comes from you will be graceful. What comes from you will be thoughtful. And especially if you were to be an architect or a designer or even a farmer, that what you do will also be done with an eye to beauty, because beauty is harmony. Okay, so this is what we're talking about then. Okay, does anyone want to ask a question? Yes?
Can you perhaps elaborate on why the discussion on reality and truth is being framed for beauty?
What do you mean?
So there's an emphasis on the discussion regarding beauty and what
Mhm.
beauty is, and that beauty is truth and reality,
Mhm.
God himself. Why is that an important framing of the discussion
Mhm.
of truth and reality?
Okay, so why is that important? It's not arbitrary. Okay, and this is very important, that beauty is not arbitrary. God is beautiful. God loves beauty. So if you have the truth, then, and God is the ultimate manifestation of that truth,
then as you approach the real, you also approach the beautiful. And you could call it the majestic as well. God is Al-Jameel as well as Al-Jaleel. And in fact, in some of the transmissions of the Asma al-Husna, the most beautiful names of God, he is called Al-Jaleel al-Jameel. So these two go together. So it could be majesty and beauty, but these are central qualities that pertain to the attributes of God, and that pertain also to reality itself. And when you take virtue, when virtue comes into your heart, that is called internal beauty. Okay, and we talk about ihsan. You see, ihsan, which is the epitome of the religion. And we'll come to that in a minute. And then, in your ihsan, you're doing beauty. You're making beauty. Then that takes in the whole society. So let's talk about this a little bit more. Beauty then has ontological roots. Beauty has metaphysical roots. Beauty is central to the nature of reality when properly perceived. Excuse me. Beauty and true knowledge go hand in hand. And as we said before, ugliness is the mark, what did we say? The brand of falsehood. Modernity is a very complex phenomenon, and it's extremely important for us to understand what it means and how it developed. Okay, but modernity, from the time of its inception, by its own admission, has a problem with ugliness. Ugly industrial cities, slums. And this has to do with many things: capitalism, the creation of new divisions of labor, especially unskilled. Capitalism loves the unskilled laborer because he can't say anything, or she can't say anything. We didn't like, we welcome laborers, but in the Muslim world, labor is skilled labor. And it takes great pride in that. And all of this goes back to that self-sufficiency that we talked about in the city. Okay? So, beauty and true knowledge, along with virtue, they go hand in hand. And as we said, this is an ontological reality. In other words, it's not an ideology. And if you get it right, it will produce. And this means also that if you have the truth, then expect creativity to come. And Muslims have been remarkably creative people. Remarkably creative people. When Islam spread in Java, which is one of the great miracles of Islamic history, Java was a Hindu-Buddhist rice civilization that had a thoroughgoing metaphysics which was expressed in their art. Okay? And when Islam spreads in Java and rice peasants begin to become Muslims, and they're going to come to the mosque, well, the mosque will be usually a marble floor because of the fact that you can't put down carpets, you can't put down mats, it's too humid. People can bring in prayer rugs if they want, but it will be a marble floor. And the peasants coming out of the rice field many days of the year, and his or her feet are going to be very muddy. So how are you going to keep them from tracking up the mosque? You're going to put guards at the door? They probably won't come back. You have to be polite in Javanese society. So again, creatively, we solve that problem with beauty. And so when you go to the wudu, you have to walk through water. A little pool of water. And you're going to do wudu. So your feet are probably pretty clean. And then when you come to the mosque to walk in, you have to walk through a bigger pool of water that goes around the whole mosque. So that means very few people will track mud into the mosque. And now, the water that goes around the wudu fountain or around the mosque, it's going to be muddy. And that could mean you get mosquitoes and you get larvae there. And so they put big fish, carp, in the water. They eat the larvae, and you can eat the fish. Yes? Mhm. Okay, let's just deal with that first. What is the question?
The question is that human attributes like beauty. So, it's okay now? Okay. So, my question is that beauty and ugliness and all these, they are attributes of humanity or the human society. So you're trying to link these attributes to define Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So is it in the same context, or you're trying to attribute Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a different context?
Did you understand?
Not 100% clear.
Mm-hmm.
Because beauty and ugliness and all these things are to define a human.
Well,
Human society.
yeah. So, did you understand?
So
Mhm.
I-
Confusion there about whether beauty is attributable to human.
Attributes of humanity.
Okay, so your question is beauty attributable to humans? Is that it? And ugliness? So that's the question. That's very good. And of course, human beings love beauty. They are attracted to beauty. And they are capable of producing beauty. And the beauty they produce will always reflect what they believe. Does that make sense to you? Human beings are also capable of extreme ugliness. And that ugliness they produce will also reflect what they believe or disbelieve. Okay? If you believe the truth, and the truth is related to God, that's a principial truth, and God is beautiful, then it comes from the top down. It doesn't go from the bottom up. So, the beauty of traditional Islamic societies had an indirect didactic role. Had an indirect didactic role. What does didactic mean? Yes. Yes. Teaching. See, this is very important. The beauty of traditional Islamic societies, like a great mosque, it had an indirect didactic role. It was beauty manifest, but a beauty that reflected the truth that is at the very core of reality. Okay? So that beauty fought on your behalf. This is very, very important, that when you create a society in which beauty becomes the norm, as it was in many traditional Muslim societies, and of course is it that way today in Muslim societies. Today, Muslim societies are often, but not always, the ugliest societies on earth, the most poorly organized on earth, the most polluted on earth. Okay, we are nothing today like we were in the past. Cairo was one of the wonders of the world, but today it's not. You know, so, but when beauty is there, the splendor of truth, then it thinks on your behalf. It furnishes you with a criterion of truth. And this is very, very important, because all of these things we believe in, these ultimate realities that are based in the nature of reality, they're actually very profound. They're immense. But the beauty that takes in the society, it manifests them to people. It attracts people to those ideas. And it thinks on their behalf. Or you could say it enables them to think. And it enables them to grow. And it enables them to embrace the realities that we believe in. Okay, so that's just a beginning. Now, where do we go from there? Let's just review some of the things that we've said. The human being is capable of perfection. Okay, again, this is something that some Muslims today would be startled by. But traditionally, the purpose of religion, of course, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Okay? I did not create the spirits and the human beings, but that they worship me. Okay, so we were created to worship God. And we cannot be happy unless we worship God. Okay, that's where our happiness lies. Okay, so this is the first purpose. And Ibn Abbas, he says that the verse means, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْرِفُونَ. I did not create the jinn and the human beings, but that they know me, but that they know God. What is the benefit then of the verse being in the form it's in? Why doesn't it just say that? وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْرِفُونَ. These are among the many profound subtleties of the Quran. So one of the things that you learn from that is that you will come to know God by ibadah, through humility, through submission, through being God's servant, and not, for example, through philosophical contemplation. Okay, so there are profound truths about reality that people who think, who use their intellect, can arrive at. And these pertain always to God, especially when we're using the intellect properly. But this will not be the right path. The right path must be submission. It must be obedience. It must be ibadah, worship and servitude. And from that will come the knowledge. And from that knowledge will come everything. So we are created to worship. We worship so that we know. And when we know God and we are transformed by that knowledge, imitating the Prophet ﷺ and the great companions and salaf of the Ummah, then we become better and better and better. And we strive for self-perfection. And we call this purification of the self and good character. But the human being is not only capable of this, the human being is charged with this responsibility. Okay, and that perfected human being, if you're not bothered by that word, that human being who has strived to perfect himself or herself, they are the ones who harmoniously integrate into themselves Islam, which in the Hadith of Gabriel, which we'll look at in a minute, is outward obedience, the outward form of obedience, and Iman, which is sound creedal belief with understanding. Okay, not just lip service, although we will accept the lip service, but you understand that this is true and why this is true. Iman. And the Iman is what gives us access to the truth that transforms us. And then Ihsan, which is moral perfection. Ihsan, which literally means what? To be beautiful and to do beauty, to produce beauty. Okay, so this perfected human being who harmoniously integrates Islam, Iman, and Ihsan into a single organic whole has natural access to the real. That person has natural access to what is true about God, what is true about creation, what is true about human beings, what they need, what will benefit them. Okay, and about the way we interact with all of these elements. Okay, now let's look at Hadith Gabriel. So we'll go to that. This is, as you know, one of the great hadiths of our tradition. And it's said that in the corpus of hadith, Hadith Gabriel is a hadith that is like Al-Fatiha. It's called As-Sunnah. It is the foundation, the mother of the Sunnah. All of the Sunnah goes back to it, just as the Fatiha is called what? Quran, the mother of the Quran, the foundation of the Quran. Because all of the Quran goes back to Al-Fatiha. So what is the Hadith of Gabriel? This is a translation of the narration of Imam Muslim, and there are many transmissions of this hadith. They're very important to look at. So the narrator, who is Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him, he says, while we were in the presence of God's messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a certain day, suddenly there appeared to us a man in intensely white garments and with intensely black hair. No sign of travel could be seen on him, and no one among us knew, or we could say recognized him. He came forward until he sat just in front of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and placed his knees against those of the Prophet and placed the palms of his hands on the Prophet's thighs sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Well, first of all, Medina was, we call it the city of Medina, but it wasn't a city like Boston. Medina was a collection of fortresses in a big oasis, a huge date oasis that is many, many miles squared. And it had a lot of people, had many different clans, but it wasn't that big. And everybody recognizes everybody else. You know who is a foreigner and who is not. And how do you get to Medina? Well, you walk there. You ride a donkey, you ride a mule, a horse, a camel. That's the only way you could get there. And to walk across the desert, which is very difficult, across the mountains around Medina, which are very difficult. When you get there, everybody will know you've been traveling. You want to change your clothes. You want to take a bath. You want to work on your hair. You'll be covered in dust. And you will have been perspiring. And the dust will have mixed with the perspiration. So they will know this is a traveler. And of course, their custom was to receive the traveler with great joy and to take the traveler in and to let him eat and drink. You don't even ask, who are you? Where do you come from? First, give them food, give them drink, and let them rest. They want to wash. Maybe they want to sleep. And after that, you might ask them, where do you come from? Okay, they won't do that in the beginning. You're a traveler, you come in, you have to eat, you have to drink. Please wash, be at home, rest a little bit. Maybe you need to sleep. And then after that, and where do you come from? What's your name? So they're amazed because this man comes in beautiful white garments. And there's no sign of travel on him. And nobody knows him. Nobody recognizes him. How can this be? How can this be? How can we explain that? And then the man comes up to the Prophet, and of course the man is extremely beautiful, extremely handsome. And he puts his knees next to the Prophet's knees, and he puts his hands on the Prophet's thigh. And this is part of ancient Arab culture. So we don't do that today. Today we would say, why is he doing that? But in that day, that means I have great need. That's what it means. I'm coming to you with something urgent. And so this is what you do. You get up very close. You put your knees up to his knees. You put your hands on his thighs. It means you've got to help me. What I'm asking you is very important. You've got to give me an answer. So he does that. And he said, Muhammad, tell me about Islam. And here we can write Islam with a little I, not a capital I. But Islam does mean what? It means submission. Submission. And amazingly, Islam also means to enter into peace, to enter into a state of perfection, perfect peace. But you do that through submission to God. Muhammad, tell me about Islam. God's messenger, may God extol him and grant him peace, said, Islam is that you bear witness that there is no God but God, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God, that you establish the daily prayer, that you pay the obligatory charity fully, that you fast Ramadan, make pilgrimage to the house of God if you are able to find a way to it. He said, namely the man who came to visit, you have spoken the truth. So we were amazed at him asking the Prophet and then stating that he had spoken the truth. So it only gets stranger. That he comes and he's sitting there in the posture of a student in great need, or of a beggar, or of someone who needs help. And he asks him this question, and then the Prophet answers. He said, you got it right. So, and as you know, in the end, this is all to teach us. All to teach us. But also this shows us that what is being taught is extremely important. This is your deen. That's why it's urgent. That's why he does it in this way. Then he said, again, this beautiful man with the white garments, tell me about Iman with a little I. The messenger said, faith, true belief. The messenger said that you believe in God, His angels, His books, His messengers, and the last day, and that you believe in qadr, predestination, that of it which is good and that of it which is evil. So everything that happens in the world, God decreed that to be. God is absolutely good. No qualifications. But God creates multiplicity. And multiplicity is infinite, potentially. And in multiplicity necessarily includes the creation of contradictions, such as the contradiction of evil. Okay, so we have to believe that. And again, the Prophet even repeats it, and that you believe, so that we know that the belief in God's complete control over reality is absolutely essential. And again, the wonderful guest replied, you've spoken the truth. The same thing. You've spoken the truth. So tell me about ihsan. Tell me about ihsan, moral perfection. But again, the word, as we noted before, means to be in a state of beauty, to do beauty, to be beauty, to transmit beauty. So tell me about ihsan. The messenger said that you worship God as if you could see Him. That you worship God as if you could see Him. For even if you do not see Him, He surely sees you. I mean, this is so profound. Sorry? Oh, okay, thank you very much. All right? So this hadith is so profound. Beauty is the splendor of truth. You worship God, you know God, live with God as if you could see Him, never forgetting that He sees you. He is closer to you than your jugular vein. And then what will that do? That brings you into the state of ihsan. That brings you into the most beautiful state of all. That brings you into a state which we can call moral perfection, spiritual perfection. And then you will be a recipient of beauty, and you will be a giver of beauty. This is all implicit in that. Okay? And then he said, the wonderful visitor, so tell me about the hour. Tell me about the hour of the coming of the day of judgment, the last day. The messenger said, the one who is asked, that is himself, is not more knowledgeable about this than the one asking, the amazing guest. And, this is a very important general principle about the last day. We're not here to talk about the last day, but there are legal wisdoms in the last day that are extremely important. But we begin by nobody knows what time it is. You cannot predict, even though the signs of the last day may appear, that this is what that is, and that the day of judgment is going to be tomorrow. The prophet says, the one who is asked himself, who would be most privy to that, does not have more knowledge about this than the one who is asking. So what about you and me? We have to be very careful about that, and people get into ridiculous positions. You remember when the year 2000 came, and everybody was in terror that our computers would fail and the internet would fail. And there are people saying the day of judgment is tomorrow. Sell your house, go off to the mountains. There are people who did that. And people who told them that, no, this is it. It's going to happen. May we not be fooled by these things. May we not be naive. So then the amazing guest said, so tell me about its sign. Tell me about its alama. And in some transmissions, tell me about its signs. The messenger said that the maiden give birth to her mistress, and that you see the barefoot, naked, and needy herdsmen of sheep vying with each other in building tall buildings. So that's amazing, amazing. Then he went away, the stranger. And I, that is the narrator, Umar, remained for a long time, not knowing who it was. A long time here could be 5 minutes, 30 minutes, a day, 2 days. Usually they say 3 days. It's about 3 days. Umar didn't know who that was. And then one day, the Prophet said, Umar, do you know who the person was asking the questions? I replied, God and his messenger know best. The Prophet said it was Gabriel. It was the angel Gabriel, who came to all of you to teach you your religion. He came to all of you, plural you. He came to you to teach you your deen. Now, this is the Fatiha of Hadith. This is the Sunnah. This is the great Hadith, absolutely authentic, that brings all the Sunnah together. And, we'll talk about it a little bit. This Hadith tells us so many things. First of all, as we'll see in a minute, it is a very late Hadith. In Hadith, you have Meccan Hadith and you have Medinan Hadith. Just as in the Quran, you have Meccan surahs and you have Medinan surahs. If you know about Hadith, for example, you may know that there are Hadith that talk about the foundations, the pillars of Islam, that don't mention pilgrimage. Okay, so why? This one does mention pilgrimage. Again, this is a sign of absolute historical authenticity, because all those hadith are before the peaceful conquest of Mecca. And therefore, pilgrimage was not possible, because Mecca and the rites of pilgrimage were in the hands of the pagans of Quraysh, who were at war with the Prophet ﷺ and with Islam. And so the Prophet, in his mercy as a prophet, speaks to the people according to what they can do right then, at that minute. And they can't make pilgrimage. They can't make Umrah. So this one, of course, has in it pilgrimage. If you can do it, if you can find a way there. But this is therefore after the conquest of Mecca, the peaceful conquest of Mecca. And now pilgrimage has become one of the pillars of the religion. Of course, in God's knowledge, it was always that way, but it will not be required of people until they can do it. And here we see that the deen, which is the entire religion, the religion in its entirety, it has these elements: Islam, Iman, and Ihsan. And this hadith also shows us the great status of the companions. Okay? Because of the fact that God honors them in this hadith with actually witnessing the angel Gabriel before them. And that is an immense honor, a huge honor. And not only are they able to see him and to hear him, and of course he's there manifested in human form, because angels do that. Angels are able to take human form. But here he comes to teach them their religion, which is an incredible statement of their standing, their integrity, their worth, and also now that they are the transmitters of this faith. They will very soon be the only ones who take it, because the Prophet will not be with them for very long now. And so this is a hadith that goes with the verse, which is in the Quran, in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse number 3 of Surah number 5, اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمُ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا. That this day have I perfected for you your deen, your religion. I've brought it to its fulfillment, its completion, and fulfilled my blessing upon you, and contented myself with Islam for you as a religion. So, this verse, like that hadith, they come from the same time. Ibn Ashur, he says that this verse was revealed when the Prophet was leaving Al-Hudaybiyah. Although he says it probably was sometime after that. Others say, and I think Ibn Ashur would agree with this, that it was revealed on the day of Arafah, in the farewell pilgrimage. Some say it was revealed to the Prophet on his way home from the farewell pilgrimage, that this day have I perfected for you your religion. And this hadith is saying the same thing. It's saying, I have perfected this faith for you now. Everything has been given to you. Everything has been transmitted to you. We just talk a little bit more about the hadith. And especially we try to keep our eyes on the phenomenon of beauty. And Nisa'i, who also has the transmission of this hadith in his collection, he states that the Prophet would sit among his companions, and a stranger, the gharib, would come and would not know which of them was the Prophet. And then he would begin to ask and ask and ask. And this is, of course, also extremely beautiful. We really have to, contemplate the incredible beauty of the Quran and of the Sunnah and of the Seerah. But isn't it amazing? The Prophet ﷺ was one of the greatest egalitarians the world ever saw. He was not a strong man. He was not a strong man, like a dominant, domineering person. His influence among his companions was because he was so beautiful. He was so kind. He was not rough ever. And the Prophet ﷺ could have eaten his full every day. And he could have worn the garments of kings, because gifts, whatever gifts there are, they always come to him. But as you know, he always gives them away. He will never keep anything more than he and his family need. And he will distribute everything, which is a model for us, and we must never forget it. But it means that they all dress about the same. So when a foreigner, an outsider comes to Medina, the Prophet is not distinguished by his dress, because he gives away everything he gets, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So whatever he was given, however beautiful it was, somebody else will have it. He may have something new. He's extremely beautiful, and also it shows that they were too. You become like the people whose company you keep. And this is an amazing reality. and a great source of hope. Because when we find good people, we want to hold on to them. We want to keep their company and be attached to them. Okay, and when we do that, we become like them. Little by little, we are transformed by them, just as people who keep the company of bad people, how can they not become bad? You know, you become like the people whose company you keep. So this also means that, you know, and we have other hadith that indicate this very clearly, that when people would come to the Prophet ﷺ, they could not distinguish him from his companions. Because they're all beautiful. They're all radiant. They all have the same stamp of beauty, the splendor of truth. And so this becomes a problem, because especially towards the end of the prophetic mission, and that's where we are now, people are coming from everywhere. They want to see the Prophet. Arabs come from every part of Arabia. I have to see this man. And you have people coming from Persia, people coming from China, some of the amazing people of West Africa, like the Mandinkas, who are all Muslims, and they're an amazing people. The Mandinkas say our traditions go back over 10,000 years. Don't take that lightly. They do have tradition. Okay, but they say, we sent delegations to the Prophet. That's what they say. Maybe the historians don't record that, but they say, no, we did. And that's when our Islam began. And out of politeness and out of husnul dhan, we accept that. There's no reason why we shouldn't. One of the things that Arnold Toynbee, who's a great historian, shows is that, you know, who makes history? Who makes history? Minorities. History is always in the hands of minorities. And the majority, you know, even if it can vote, you know, it never can control. Okay, minorities do that. And there are different types of minorities. In this country, for example, who owns the wealth? 50% of the population? 60%? 70%? Or 1%? Right? I mean, this is an amazingly wealthy country, but who controls 99% of that wealth? It's not 99% of the people. Okay, and those people constitute a minority, whether they can be visited in a neighborhood or not. And those minorities galvanize themselves. And they protect their privilege. They protect their power. That's what they do. And so you have different kinds of minorities. You have minorities that are domineering, that manipulate. You have minorities that are simply dominant, but not necessarily domineering. And then you have something that Toynbee calls the creative minority. And that's a nice word. The beautiful minority. And the prophetic minority of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions is the best example of that there is. So it is a very small group of people, numbering a few thousand, yes, but compared to the world, they're a drop in the sea. And they are very galvanized. They cohere. They love each other. إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ إِخْوَةٌ. Only the believers are brothers. Not the believers are only brothers, no. There are many things. Only the believers are brothers. Only the believers are sisters. Brotherhood and sisterhood are the essential qualities of the true believer. And if we don't have them, then we better check out our belief. Okay? So minorities are very important. And the creative minority, you know, which is the one that gives and the one that brings people together and which is egalitarian. It is not dividing to conquer. Because the domineering minority will divide the people to rule. And many of the problems that we have in the Muslim world today, they are for that reason. There are beneficiaries of the conflict. There are people who are maintaining control for their groups because of the conflict. Okay? In any case, what Toynbee says is that the domineering minorities and dominant minorities always alienate the people. They're essentially enemies of the people. Okay, they always alienate the people because they exploit them. They use them. They don't give them access to power and privilege. We had a group, and have a group in the United States called the 5%ers. Do you know why they're called that? And they are Islamic, proto-Islamic. They have different expressions that they've gone through. Inner city black. Okay, but their teaching was that 10% of the people are the bloodsuckers of the poor. That's what they said. Okay, I didn't say that. They said that. That's what they believed. We might say it's not 10%, it's 1%. Okay? And they might say that today. And they said 85% are deaf, dumb, and blind. Okay, because of the fact that they don't know what's going on. You know, they are manipulated. And 5% are teachers of the poor. And to me, that's really beautiful. I mean, whether the teachers of the poor are there or not, and whether they're 5% or not, we should be teachers of the poor. And we teach everybody, poor and rich. But this is the way the Prophet was, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a teacher of the poor, a teacher of the downtrodden, who gives them the shirt off of his back. Literally, once the Prophet had 10 pieces of silver, little pieces of silver. And so he went to the market, and with 3 pieces of silver, he bought a new garment. And as soon as he came out from buying it, a man came up and said, "I have no garment." And so he gave it to him. And then he bought another one so now it's 6 dinars, right? He's got 4 left. And then when he came, he put that garment on, and he turned around, and there was a slave girl, a maiden, young girl, crying. Okay, and so he said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "I was sent to the market to buy these things and lost my money. And I will get in trouble." You know, and so he said, "No, take these 4 dinars. And she still cried. Because she said, "I can buy all the things I need and I'll do that, but I'm going to still get punished because I lost my 4 dinars. And when they know that you gave me this, they're not going to be very happy." So he said, "Let me go with you. I'll take you home." So she gets all the things that she needs, and he walks her back to her clan, where she is a servant. And of course, do you think they don't know the Prophet's coming? I mean, the word is racing everywhere. The Prophet's coming, the Prophet's coming. He's coming to visit you. He's got your little girl, your maidservant with him. And so then the Prophet comes to the house where she works, and he said, "Assalamu alaikum." And they don't say anything. He said it again, "Assalamu alaikum." They don't say anything. Then he said it a 3rd time, "Assalamu alaikum." Then they say, "Wa alaikum assalam ya Rasulullah." "Peace be upon you, O Messenger of God." And he says, "Why didn't you answer the first time?" He said, "We just wanted the blessing of hearing your voice 3 times. Okay, and then he said, "I just came home to ask you to please be kind to this little girl." And they said, "You brought her to our house? You know, she's free for the sake of God." They emancipated her, and emancipation, as you know, is an act of worship. And so she was set free, and the Prophet then said in this beautiful hadith, "What a blessed 10 pieces of silver. I bought 1 garment, which I gave away, which is a blessing. I kept another. And then with the other 4, this girl got everything she needed. Oh, she was set free. These are really beautiful, beautiful examples. But this is the way he was, and because he was this way, the whole community radiates that love. The whole community radiates that beauty. And the sign of a believer in Medina was Bishr and Bishara. It was that you show happiness and you smile, which is a sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and that you give nothing but good news. And how do you do that? You've got to keep your heart clean. Never speak ill of anyone unless you absolutely have to protect others. Don't backbite, don't slander, don't bear tales. And of course the Sahaba cared about that intensely. Okay, and then your heart is open. And then when you meet your brother or the sister meets her sister, you're happy. You're happy. And for them to meet your brother or sister with a frown, a critical spirit, bad opinion, was the sign of the hypocrite. This is very, very important. So it was a beautiful society based on principle, but based on the practice of those principles. And this is all ihsan, that we have a good opinion of each other, that we don't backbite each other. What is backbiting? To say lies about people? No, to say the truth. But the things that are not, that affect the honor of that person. If I know that a brother says insulting things to his mother or his father, do I have a right to tell you that? Absolutely not. That's backbiting. I have to protect his honor. And we had a very good khutbah in New York yesterday, and it was about this and other things, that, you know, we have got to learn to protect each other's honor. And, you know, our mosques must be bastions of that. We don't speak ill of each other. You know, we tolerate each other. We bend over backwards for each other. And we do that in our houses and in our communities and elsewhere. And this is part of what leads to the transformation. But let's get back to Hadith Gabriel. So in Hadith Gabriel, you see again this incredible phenomenon that people come to Medina and they can't tell which of these beautiful people is the Prophet ﷺ. There's nothing that distinguishes him from them, although when people meet him, they say, "This is the most beautiful human being I have ever seen." Okay? So, in this transmission of An-Nasa'i, he states that the Prophet ﷺ would sit among his companions, and the stranger from out of town would come but would not know which of them was the Prophet. And then he would ask, you know, which one is the Prophet? So they requested the Prophet ﷺ that he allow them to make for him a special majlis, a special place to sit, you know, which would be a little bit off the ground, made of clay. It's not a big, you know, a huge thing, but just a little bit high. They call that in Arabic a dukkan, you know, which is a mastaba. And it's not a dukkan like a store. But they call that in the hadith, they say, we built him a dukkan from clay so that he could sit on it. And that's actually part of the details of the Hadith Gabriel. And then it says that one day we were sitting with the Prophet and he was on his majlis. So he was sitting up. This is something he'd never done before. See, so now he's sitting on that new majlis, and then he said, إِذْ أَقْبَلَ عَلَيْنَا رَجُلٌ أَحْسَنُ النَّاسِ وَجْهًا وَأَطْيَبُ النَّاسِ رِيحًا كَأَنَّ ثِيَابَهُ لَمْ يَمُسَّهَا دَنَسٌ حَتَّى سَلَّمَ فِي طَرَفِ الْبِسَاطِ. So he said that we built this, and the Prophet was sitting there, You imagine maybe the first time or the second time, until there came to us this man who was the most beautiful of people in terms of his face. His face was the most beautiful of human faces. And his fragrance was the most fragrant scent that people could have. And his clothes were beautiful, as if nothing dirty had ever touched them. And then he gave salams at the extent of the bisat, of the mat that was put out. So he doesn't just come and sit on the platform. He sits at a distance. فَقَالَ السلام عليك يا محمد. Peace be upon you, Muhammad. فَرَدَّ عَلَيْهِ السلام. The Prophet said salams back to him. فَقَالَ أَدْنُ يَا مُحَمَّدْ. قَالَ أُدْنُ. Shall I come nearer? Muhammad, he says, come nearer. فَمَا زَالَ يَقُولُ أَدْنُ. Time and time again, and the Prophet would say, أُدْنُ, until he came up and sat with him. This is why in the study of hadith, which is one of the most precious of all studies, historically accurate but beyond words, this shows you why. This is not in the hadith of Muslim, but this gives you the details that make that a much richer account. So Gabriel doesn't just come up and sit with the Prophet. First he sits over there. He says, should I come nearer? And the Prophet said, come nearer. And then he comes a little bit nearer. And he says again, should I come nearer? He says, come nearer. So, and he does that over and over again until finally he comes very near. And he sits in front of the Prophet ﷺ, and again he puts his knees on the Prophet's knees, and he puts his hands on the Prophet's thighs. And as we said before, that in the culture of the Arab means, I have a great need, and I want you to meet that need. And notice the references to beauty, the most beautiful face, the most beautiful smell. They say that the intense whiteness of the garments, we're just going to say this a little bit to get back to beauty as the splendor of truth. The intense whiteness of the garments, that is symbolically a sign of the purity of the deeds. And we are people who believe in symbolism. And symbolism is not arbitrary in our belief. Again, beauty is the splendor of truth. That's vertical reality, rooted in the nature of existence. So here, the whiteness of the garments, of course, means they are clean. It means he wasn't traveling. We talked about that before. But on another level, it also means that he is a man of good deeds. And it also indicates symbolically kamalun nuraniya, the perfection of the light that is in this person. And in fact, that really is why he appears that way, because Gabriel never disobeys God for a moment, and everything that Gabriel does is filled with light. The intense blackness of the hair and the beard, which is specified in certain hadith, like the hadith of Ibn Hibban, also indicates kamal al-quwwat al-malakiyya. It indicates the perfection of angelic power, because the angels are extremely powerful, much more than you and I. I mean, we are nothing. So angels are always extremely powerful. And that's indicated here symbolically and actually in the blackness of the beard, the blackness of the hair. And then it shows us also that cleanliness is part of faith. All of us should, and being, and then also the word tulu' is used for Gabriel's coming. We say he appeared, but Tulu' is also what you use when you talk about the sun rising. The sun rises in the east. Tatla'u. And so this also is a beautiful expression because it alerts our minds to the appearance of light. That the coming of Gabriel is like the appearance of the sun. And all of these are manifestations of beauty. Okay? Okay, so how are we doing now? It's time for a break? Yeah, so let's take a break now. And inshallah, when do we come back? Okay, so Salat al-Dhuhr is at what time?
12:30.
Okay, so what should we do now? Okay, I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind. Inshallah. So we'll come back then after Dhuhr? Okay, inshallah. And, think about what we've said. We can ask questions, we can talk about this, and inshallah we'll proceed ahead. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Wassalamu alaikum.